Okay, so like I said, let's just pretend I did this line drawing already in front of your very eyes, and now here we go. So I have it labeled lines. The hair I've learned I want on separate layers. Over the years I've learned it just helps me out. So there we go. And then the background is just solid, is like yellow. So now let's say you want to shade this thing. And so I'm just using the default Photoshop brush, uh, the hard round. And then if I'm doing like a 10% opacity, uh, of course it's got a hard edge because that's the name of the brush. I'm also doing this on a new layer, which I'll call shading. So I'm going to do that, then it's like a hard edge. And then if I want to go in again, and this is 10% opacity, and it's not blending, and it's hard edge stuff, so that's not necessarily what I want. Of course, you can go in with the smudge tool, whichever smudge tool you choose. Remember, there's no default shortcut for smudge tool, so I customized it to H because I use it a lot. But so you could go on with the smudge tool. Wow, when I'm running WebEx and recording, it makes Photoshop run so slow. And I don't even have Chrome open. All right, I'm gonna get rid of this. So I deleted the layer mask. I'm gonna make a new one. I'm just gonna mask out these cheek lines now because they're getting distracting. So, maybe if you're going for like some comic book style or something, you do want a hard edge here like that. But if you're going for a softer look, then you might need to smudge it out or just use a softer brush in the first place. So you can go up here to get a softer brush, or if you're using the default brush, like Jimmy's been doing, you hold down shift. If you look up here, hold down shift and press the right or left bracket, it makes it harder edge or softer edge. So now I just changed it to softer edge. 10% again over here, let's do, and so you can see that, how that's going. But 10% is pretty extreme. So I usually do it at like 5% or something, so I can build it up slowly a little more instead of full blown 10%. And you can see that I was pressing the bracket buttons, left and right brackets, to make the brush size go up quickly and not have to go up here to size and change the size every time. Okay, so I'm just quickly gonna do a little job here. Okay, let's say, I just did that super quickly, but this looks like, it could work, but this is because one of the ways to define your edges is with line. And so right now I've got these lines on around the nose that are doing a lot of work for me. If I mask out these lines on the nostrils here, now that nose doesn't look so good anymore. It looks soft and the edges aren't defined. So one way to do it is to use lines. And so you'll see me doing that a lot of times. And sure, I'll do less opacity so it's not so blatantly like a black line, like so it can still slightly work. But let's say you're doing a paint release style like Jimmy, and you need to define these edges here. So now we're gonna get into it. So one way is, you could just erase out with whatever varying hardness eraser. So if I'm doing like the hardest edged eraser, let's say the default hardest edged eraser on here. Then you start to get something that looks like this, right? And that's like defining the nose. Without using line. So what I just did was the eraser, which is bad because that's like not necessarily bad. Oftentimes on the shading thing, I won't mask out everything because it gets very tedious masking and unmasking stuff. So you can also make a mask and then brush on with the brush, which might seem like who cares, but I'll show why that matters in a minute. So now, again, here's just the default Photoshop brush, the hardest edge brush. And I'm defining this edge again with hard edge. So hard versus soft. So look, out here on this side of the nose is a hard edge. On the inside where it's shading, that's soft. It's dithering, it's like gradating from dark to light to the highlight part on this nostril. So there's hard versus soft edge, which probably everyone knows, of course, but and the good thing with a mask is that I went too far here, so I can go back in and get some back, or make it a soft, go from the hard brush to softer, and then gently at 10% put some of it back in so it doesn't look so crazy, So there's one way. Second way is with lines. But also why a mask is good is because you can use texture. You can use texture to kind of erase out stuff because you're masking it out. Let me get a better brush. Here I can do this line. I'm masking it back in. Yeah, let me just start over. Okay, here it is. No mask at all going on. You can use a brush on the mask that's got like a texture edge to it. And so now it's not like just the hard Photoshop, like perfect Photoshop hard edge brush, which is like that. Well, hopefully you could see the difference between using a texture brush so the edge isn't completely, why is it not zooming in? Zoom in, computer. Anyway, hopefully you can see the difference between an edge made with just a default Photoshop brush and then this edge over here was made with, a texture brush. So the edge is imperfect slightly, but still, when you zoom out to the normal level, there's some nuance to it instead of just the hard edge like Photoshop brush, default brush. And so I'm just gonna go on to here again. So like I just shade with the animator pencil. Another way to do it is another way to do it is just very carefully do it like as if you're painting, like painterly. So Jimmy might be opting for this option where he very carefully doesn't go outside the lines to get that hard edge. So I'm using pressure because if I do full pressure, it's like this wide. But if I do like little tiny brush strokes, then I can get a more defined edge. So depending on what brush you use, it can only get so soft. So this pencil brush can only get so soft. And so I will have to eventually go in for the style that I want and like smudge this down. Maybe less so on the inside, but here it's going out to like a flatter cheekbone area. So I want a lot of gradient here and less gradient on the inside. Maybe I can get away with doing this real quick. What's happening there? Okay, so if you're gonna do a trick like that I just did, a lot of times it's better to do it at the beginning when you still can go back in and do individual personalized brush strokes so it doesn't look so computer perfect on both sides. Like you're adding interest points that are different on the other sides. So it's not identical. But okay. I guess one more. I'm just gonna shade this with the default soft Photoshop brush, which I've seen maybe probably Larissa and Jimmy have been using this default soft brush maybe. So everyone is gonna have to find the brush that like fits their computer like capabilities, I guess. This is the default Photoshop brush. So, I mean, it does look a little too perfect. So then I guess if I was Jimmy or Larissa or whoever, I would go back in either way, masking or erasing with a hard edge, especially like on the nostrils here. You know, so it's not all singing it the same note, which is soft everywhere. You have to have hard edges in some places. So let me see. But in the end, you know, if you want a textural thing to happen, then you can't use that default Photoshop brush because it'll just be soft. Uh, let me take away. Let me try to take away some stuff. Sorry, I'm trying to decipher my file here. Oh. Why? Okay, anyway, you know, here's my original pencil shading that I did with the animated pencil. Uh, and if I were to do it with just the default Photoshop brush, you know, there's that nose shading versus over there. It's not textural because it's just the default flat. I mean, no texture Photoshop brush. So it's got its uses, that brush, but I don't. If you're going for Painterly, there's tons of Painterly Kyle Webster brushes that you could try out. Um, so which Kyle brush is that? I mean, the Kyle brush that I'm using, again, I do not recommend using this brush, the Animator pencil, uh, because it crashes. It crashes and it's hard to use. There's probably better pencil brushes out there, but this is what I've gotten used to. I would seriously recommend trying out not the Animator pencil brush. Oh, and just one last thing before I turn this off. You can see here's my shading layer over here, and this is the initial shading layer. And then I saw that it wasn't doing enough, so then it's easy to just copy it and double it up. So it's doing double duty now, and I didn't have to keep shading meticulously over everything again. I could just copy that layer again and then get double the shading power. And then sometimes, you know, you can see up here, I dropped it down to 75% opacity because I didn't need 100% extra shading power. I only needed like 75% more. So defining edges, you know, in shading, especially soft over here, but then you're gonna want hard edges like around the eye bags and stuff. So, okay. Questions about brushes?